What's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how to use the controller helper mode from Kinsi. So first we're going to go in settings, mod settings right here, and we're going to click on controller helper. Here the first slider, enable axis arrow in menu, will actually show arrows on your controllers. It will show two different types of arrows. It will show the red arrows and the gray arrows. I'm going to explain later what they do. Enable axis arrows in replays. We'll do the exact same thing, but instead of in the menu, it's going to show it also in the replay. I'm going to turn that on as well. Custom controller setting method is basically going to change the way the controller settings is applied to your controller. It's going to change the order. So it's going to change like dramatically where your controller is positioned after some controller setting modifications. So we're going to turn that on and you're going to see that your controller is completely off from where it actually is. That's totally fine. We're going to fix that later. And the last is mirror Z rotation for left. Basically, the base game does not mirror the Z rotation for your left controller. If you're using the base game's controller settings, you want to turn that on. But if you're using SaberTailor, you can leave that off. For us, we're going to start with the base game settings. So we're going to leave that on for now. After activating the mod, you can see that each of my controllers have two different types of arrows. The red arrows represent the direction of my controller, and the gray arrows actually represent the position of the world. So these gray arrows are actually static and they're never going to change no matter how I actually move my controller. So recently, I actually made a document regarding controller settings. It's a full guide that helps you figure out your controller settings step by step. So here the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out at which angle you're using your controller when you're naturally swinging up and down. If I swing up and down like this, I'll see that the X and the Y arrows are not perfectly lined up with the gray arrows. What I want to do is I want to change that rotation Z to make it so that the arrows are actually lining up. So here I put it to -69, and if I swing up and down, you'll see that when I stop swinging, the X and the Y arrow are roughly lined up. Of course, this is not perfect, but you can work on it to make it line up perfectly. Next, we're going to try to figure out a little bit the position Z. In the case of Rift S, the controller is extremely pushed back into my wrist, and for this reason, I'm going to give it roughly a 5.5 position Z offset. It really depends on the VR you're on. You really just have to push it a little forward to make it match with where your actual hand is. So here the next thing we want to figure out is the rotation X and the position X. The way you want to figure it out is by taking your wrist right in front of you and rotating it on itself. Technically, if you have the correct position, the saber should not be moving around. You can see here that it's moving very slightly. I also noticed that the point of rotation is a little bit on the right. So you see when I rotate, it's a little bit on the right. So that means I'm going to push the saber more to the right. And you will see that my controller now is significantly more stable. But I notice now that it's moving in a sort of cone shape. So even though it's very, very little, the controller is like pointing slightly to down and it's rotating around that cone shape. You will see what I mean when you actually try it yourself. So for this reason here, I'm going to point the saber a little more down to make it more straight. And when I'm going to rotate, it's going to be even more stable. It's still doing it a little bit. It's not perfect, but it's still significantly better than no offset. Luckily, with this grip and this config, my position and my rotation X is not that high. But I do believe that on other controllers, such as Index, there's going to be quite a big difference. So you're going to need a lot more adjustment here. The last part will be adjusting the rotation Y and the position Y. This is definitely the hardest part here, and it's going to take some time. What you want to do is when swinging up and down, you want to look at the rotation point at which your controller is rotating around. I can already see that when I'm swinging naturally up and down, that the rotation Z and the rotation X is kind of like pointing out. For this reason, I'm going to already apply a rotation Y because I know it's going to be needed, or my swings will be curving outward. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in an actual map and I'm going to give it a shot. right before I'm gonna play the map, I'm actually gonna go in mod settings here, and I'm gonna disable the axis in replay, just because I don't want the arrows while I'm playing. So the map you want to use for this, it can be basically any jump map, anything that is really fast, over 300 BPM. I personally like this map just because there's a lot of jumps. I'm actually gonna skip at that jump section at near 253. And I'm gonna slow it down a little bit just to make sure there's no saber wobble. So I'm gonna analyze my own swing while playing this map, and I'm gonna analyze the way my swings are actually rotating. So here, obviously, I mean, I can feel it, but if you need, you can watch the replay. And I can see that it's curving outward by quite a lot. I'm gonna go back to my settings, and I'm gonna decrease that rotation Y quite a lot. So I'm gonna point the saber more in to compensate for that curve. Because I have roughly the right rotation, I'm gonna start working on the position Y as well. So after playing with the values around, like try to lower rotation Y, try to lower rotation X, playing around the position Y, position X as well, I end up with like a pretty good config. So obviously you have to kind of go in game, see how it feels, see how nice it is to play with it. This is what I ended up with using all my tests, and I can show you guys exactly what it looks like. Obviously, I don't think this config is actually perfect, but I think it is actually pretty good for something that we figured out in almost no time. So here I'm going to skip to 243. So of course, like I said, it's not perfect, especially my left hand. We haven't worked on my left hand yet, so my left hand's going to feel pretty uncomfortable. But for my right hand, it's actually not bad at all. But if we look at the actual swings, and I will look at a replay again, if you look at the actual swings, they actually don't look too bad. So just by following the guide, I ended up with some roughly straight swing, as I said. Not perfect, but if I work on it for, 2 to 3 hours, I am pretty sure we could get some better config. So here I see a slight outward curve. That could fix very, very easily just by changing a rotation Y. So if that were just me, I would go back to my settings again, and I would just lower rotation Y by 2, and that's it. So once you're done with the base setting config, what you can do is you can go to mod settings, and go to controller helper, and turn off that mirror Z rotation for the left. Then you can go in SaberTailor, and you can go to transfer grip to / from game settings, and then you just click import from game. Here I'm not going to do it just because I already have config in my SaberTailor. And here I'm going to go to saber grip position and modification, and I'm going to turn on both of these sliders right here. It's very, very important that the second slider is also enabled for the mod to work. In this case here, I have slightly different settings from my right to and my left. This is totally fine. What I basically did is I mirrored all my settings, and I rated all the tests that I did from the guide on my left controller, and this is the value that I ended up with.
And that's it. If you want to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment below on what you want to see next. I hope you enjoyed the video, and good luck with your beatsaber journey.